One of the latest warnings of Whitney Webb, the amazing investigative journalist, clearly stated that she does not believe that the US government or BlackRock or some of these other entities that have become very bullish on Bitcoin are interested in protecting privacy or having Bitcoin be used for freedom money necessarily. Those points personally matter to her and are one of the reasons that she had been trying to speak to people in the Bitcoin space for some time now, because she believes a lot of those people do care about the ethos. But she thinks there is sort of an effort to flood the zone, if you will, with this idea that it doesn't matter anymore and that we should sort of surrender that ethos in favor of becoming extremely wealthy. She believes that is going to be persuasive for a lot of people, especially when we're potentially facing a debt crisis and an economic downturn. Bitcoin could be in serious danger under the grip of oligarchs, and most people don't even realize it. Bitcoin was meant to break people free from the system, but now the system owns it. Whitney believes that the same corporations and government figures it was meant to disrupt are now the ones in control. With the economy on edge and a debt crisis around the corner, most people are too focused on making money to see what's happening. The more Bitcoin gets absorbed into the system, the less it belongs to the people who built it. If the same forces that control traditional finance take over, what is left of its original purpose? There's no shortage of examples of pumping up meme coins that have robbed people of a lot of money. So, who was ultimately responsible for that pump and dump, rug pull, wealth transfer, arguably type of operation? Definitely would facilitate this type of bad behavior that we know intelligence agencies have engaged in the past, like the BCCI example. It would definitely facilitate that. And the fact that you have these types of connections there, Whitney thinks it is certainly worthy of examination. That Tether notably has a lot of the same rhetoric that BCCI once used, the idea of banking the unbanked, for example. But they are very willing to seize people's money on behalf of the US Treasury. Ardoino, who is the head of Tether now, has said that Tether is fully committed to expanding US dollar hegemony globally and has onboarded the FBI and Secret Service on their platform, and that essentially makes it a digital arm, you could argue, of the US government. When you also consider this military manual that was published by WikiLeaks well over a decade ago, they refer to the dollar and some of these styles of financial institutions that help propagate it globally, particularly in the global south, as sort of weapons, financial weapons of US empire. Whitney Webb also believes that an argument can clearly be made that Tether is sort of facilitating that, specifically in economies that have become unstable or have very unstable currencies. And some of that is partly due to US sanctions. Some of it is due to these entities that have been called financial weapons of US empire, like the IMF and the World Bank. Then their currencies are unstable. They're trapped in this debt slavery model, which is a big reason in many cases for their economic instability. And people are being onboarded onto the digital dollar, onto Tether, as a way to be able to preserve their wealth. But ultimately, it's kind of a way to globalize the dollar and covertly dollarize a country without formally dollarizing it. Places like Ecuador and El Salvador were formally dollarized, and if you consider the outside role, including in the digital asset space, its formation, its infrastructure, of some of these currency speculators, the role of currency speculators in the past, we can point to the 90s, George Soros, or arguably people like Jeffrey Epstein, if you're familiar with Whitney's work, having a role in crushing local currencies. If that were to happen today, and there's no reason to think that type of currency speculation, like Soros style in 92, for example, doesn't happen today, right? Then the end result could easily be people just sort of onboarding to the dollar, particularly a form of the dollar that is surveillable and programmable. And those were the same concerns that a lot of Americans have had about central bank digital currencies. It's not necessarily that the money would be issued by the central bank, because money is issued by the central bank now, right? It's about the concern that it represents to liberty because it's surveillable, programmable, and seizable. Whitney believes that Tether checks all of those boxes. Ultimately, and any sort of digital dollar that the US ultimately approves, which is very likely, Trump's speech at the Bitcoin conference last year said no CBDCs, but was very bullish on stablecoins, on dollar stablecoins, which are a major purchaser of U.S. treasuries, for example, and help service the U.S. debt. And if you combine that with a lot of his bullishness on Bitcoin, the talks of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, for example, Whitney believes it's very possible that we can see this type of digital dollar paradigm that Tether really helped start. And I don't think there's really a lot of discussions about whether this is good or what the potential origins or intentions of it were or still are, because a lot of people that promote Tether have very rose-tinted glasses about it and parrot this idea of banking the unbanked and sort of ignore the FBI Secret Service connection, stated Whitney. She also added that the fact that they've seized people's money when the U.S. Treasury Department has asked them to do that, even if they're not U.S. citizens, and this type of stuff, what does this ultimately mean? Whitney believes people that are particularly in the Bitcoin space, which has often been sort of flooded at times with the opinion that Tether is a Bitcoin company, should consider that, especially when a lot of the rhetoric and ideology around Bitcoin was about stopping the debt slavery system and the debt-based monetary system. Do people really want to perpetuate that? And is it really conducive to financial freedom and banking the unbanked? Meme coins have scammed people out of millions, but it's not just random scammers behind these pump and dumps. Whitney reveals that these schemes actually follow a strategy seen in past financial crimes, like the infamous BCCI scandal, a global banking fraud operation that laundered billions for drug cartels, terrorists, and corrupt officials before collapsing in 1991. Tether, the biggest stablecoin, markets itself as a tool for financial access, yet it openly cooperates with U.S. government agencies like the FBI and Secret Service, seizing user funds on request. Its CEO even states that the goal is expanding U.S. dollar control globally. Economies weakened by U.S. sanctions or currency speculation are now turning to Tether to survive. But instead of granting true financial freedom, stablecoins like Tether quietly push more countries toward dependence on a digital dollar.